Like so many people throughout the sands of time and history, perhaps you have aimlessly roamed to the farthest ends of the earth in search of a part of yourself that felt incomplete, missing. Weary and parched, a sip from the cool waters of the sweet reunion of knowledge perpetually just out of reach. Lost, alone, plagued and consumed by an invisible undertow, pulling you further and further into the merry-go-round vortex of unceasing thoughts, trying to grasp just what on earth nipple tassels, phenomenology, morphogenesis, and the stars could possibly have to do with one another. Well, search no more, my sweet compañero in dreaming. Your soul may finally be at ease, for I can give you the answer. It's the moon in Pisces.
The moon, the greatest celebrity of all time. There's something magnificent and comforting, yet unfathomable in gazing at it, along with the stars. Knowing that anyone and everyone to ever live on the earth with eyes to see has gazed upon the very same is exhilarating.
This unites all of us together, everywhere in the world, and brings the past alive to the one and only present. It's easy to imagine that nothing has inspired and been a guide to life on Earth as much as our bright satellite, to mark and keep track of the passing of time, and as the original muse for pondering life's mysteries. Every month, the word month itself having its origins from the lunar cycles, a full moon occurs when the Earth is located directly between the sun and the moon. More specifically, when the ecliptic longitudes of the sun and moon are exactly opposite one another at 180 degrees. Every 2 to 3 days, as it waxes and or wanes, ever changing, it appears to pass through a different constellation in the zodiacal belt. That means that this month, on the 20th of September of 2021 at 4:54 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, as the sun makes its way toward the end of the sign of Virgo at 28 degrees, opposite that will be the full moon at 28 degrees of Pisces. This is traditionally known as a harvest moon due to its proximity to the equinox. And that will occur this year on the 22nd at 12:20 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, as the sun moves into 0 degrees of Libra, marking the beginning of fall. The sun will also be moving closer and closer to a conjunction with Mars in Libra that will be exact in the first week of October. Now, the constellation of Pisces is one of the oldest in recorded history, its name being the Latin word for fishes. It's the last sign in the zodiacal belt before starting over again with Aries, and per definition runs from ecliptic longitude of 330 degrees to 0. In traditional astrology, the sign of Pisces is ruled by the planet Jupiter, and now with modern astrology, its co-ruler is Neptune. The sun is in Pisces from approximately February 18th to March 20th. Being the last sign of the zodiac, it's what's known as mutable, marking the end of a season. Where the sun is now in Virgo is also a mutable sign, being the end of summer. And Pisces, being the last of the mutable signs and the very end phase of winter before the world is reborn in the springtime, it's often associated with endings or the dissolving of boundaries. Mutable signs are considered a state of change and fluctuation, and with the moon in Pisces comes a certain kind of otherworldliness or dreamlike state where all things merge together. Whereas in its opposing sign, Virgo, the necessity of separating things into clear and specific categories, the process of analyzation, and the satisfaction of being able to define something by naming it. In the spirit of the full moon in Pisces, I may not be able to define exactly what it means, but through the use of imagery and poetry and following the trail of moonlight sparkling on the water's surface, we might be able to catch a glimpse of illumination in how the archetypes that are present in our current transits were so beautifully embodied in the lives of some of their earthly representatives. 2 short excerpts from Ren Butler's The Archetypal Universe on the Moon and Neptune. Just as the Sun archetype informs our identity as an autonomous, self-motivated, and creative being, the archetypal complex related to the Moon is behind our yearnings to be rooted in home, a family, and community. The Moon symbolizes our needs to connect and hold close, to belong and include, nurture and be nurtured, and to support others by reflecting back the light of their own life force. It is our reflective feeling function, our capacity to absorb and digest the experience of our daytime lives, to slow down, receive, and open to the emotional interiority of the world. The Moon represents our experience of absolute consciousness as kind and caring, as having compassion for our human pain, and as loving us in a maternal way. The Moon suggests our capacity to feel a personal relationship with the sacred and the eternal feminine presence we can perceive deep within us as soul. Neptune corresponds to the ultimate reality principle, the divine source itself, and our deepest yearnings to reconnect with it, remember where we came from and where we are going. The Neptune archetype underlies the spiritual drive, the pull of our psyches to merge with divine consciousness, as well as representing the divine itself, the unbroken field of self-aware consciousness underlying all things. At the highest levels of Neptunian experience, people realize they are not human beings having a spiritual experience, but one spiritual superconsciousness having all the experiences. The ongoing question for the cosmic creative principle seems to be, at any point, deciding how much of itself to reveal. The cosmic creative principle retains this one gift to bestow on human beings, allowing us to reawaken to our cosmic status beyond death and separation. The fountains mingle with the river, and the rivers with the ocean. The winds of heaven mix forever with a sweet emotion. Nothing in the world is single, all things by a law divine. In one spirit meet and mingle, why not I with thine? See the mountains kiss high heaven, and the waves clasp one another. No sister flower would be forgiven if it disdained its brother. And the sunlight clasps the earth, and the moonbeams kiss the sea. And what is all this sweet work worth, if thou kiss not me? Political radical and poet Percy Shelley was born on August 4th, 1792 in Sussex, England. He would fall in love, certainly not for the first and only time, with the author of Frankenstein, Mary Wollstonecraft Godwin, the daughter of one of his heroes and his mentor, William Godwin. Mary was named for her feminist author, mother, Mary Wollstonecraft, who would die less than 2 weeks after giving birth to her. As the full moon is in Pisces, Venus will be in Scorpio, separating from a square with Saturn. Percy, born with the moon in Pisces, and Mary, born with the sun conjunct Mars in Virgo and Venus squaring Saturn, and both of them with Saturn on the ascendant, would fall in love with each other, reading books on the tomb of her late mother. Eventually, they would elope and get married, despite both of them being opposed to marriage, and would live an exemplary bohemian lifestyle alongside great adventure and joy, but also marked by one tragedy after the next. Percy's publishing of a pamphlet titled The Necessity of Atheism would especially have a disastrous effect on his relationship with his family and a dramatic effect on his life. Mary would experience depression caused by the loss of multiple children who did not live past infancy, and almost lost her own life due to miscarriages and from the stress of Percy's financial debts, of which Percy himself would suffer delusional episodes and paranoia brought on by a variety of extreme stress. It was in Italy on July 8th of 1822, Percy Shelley and a friend, after meeting with fellow poet Lord Byron, would set sail in Shelley's brand new boat named the Don Juan, but they would not make it to their destination. According to Mary Shelley in Notes on Poems of 1822, the Don Juan was overmasted, the sinking due to a severe storm and poor seamanship of the men on board. Percy Shelley's body washed up on the shore 10 days later, so badly decomposed it was only identifiable from a copy of Keats's poem Lamia, found in a jacket pocket. He was cremated, yet his heart resisted burning. Preserved in spirits of wine and passed from several friends and contemporaries, one of which refused to give it to Mary, before finally being buried back in England. The day after the news of his death reached his homeland, a newspaper printed, "Shelley, the writer of some infidel poetry, has been drowned. Now he knows whether there is God or no." The words, "Nothing of him that doth fade, but doth suffer a sea change into something rich and strange," from Shakespeare's The Tempest, marks his gravestone in Italy. Style is the invariable mark of any master, and for the student who does not aspire so high as to be numbered with the giants, it is still the one quality in which he may improve himself at will. Passion, wisdom, creative force, the power of mystery or color are allotted in the hour of birth, and can be neither learned nor simulated. But the just and dexterous use of what qualities we have, the proportion of one part to another and to the whole, the elision of the useless, the accentuation of the important, and the preservation of a uniform character from end to end, these, which taken together constitute technical perfection, are to some degree within the reach of industry and intellectual courage. What to put in and what to leave out, whether some particular fact be organically necessary or purely ornamental, whether, if it be purely ornamental, it may not weaken or obscure the general design, and finally, whether, if we decide to use it, we should do so grossly and notably, or in some conventional disguise, are questions of plastic style continually re-arising. And the Sphinx that patrols the highways of executive art has no more unanswerable riddle to propound. Robert Louis Stevenson was born in Edinburgh, November 13th of 1850, with the moon in Pisces conjunct Neptune, to a family of lighthouse engineers. Famed for writing infamous works such as Treasure Island and The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, he was a celebrity in his own time and inspired many other writers of renown. He wrote in Essays in the Art of Writing, in the chapter Books Which Have Influenced Me. Goethe's Life by Lewis had a great importance for me when it first fell into my hands. A strange instance of the partiality of man's good and evil. I know no one whom I less admire than Goethe. He seems a very epitome of the sins of genius, breaking open the doors of private life and wantonly wounding friends in that crowning offense of Werther. And yet in his fine devotion to his art, in his honest and serviceable friendship for Schiller, what lessons are contained? Biography, usually so false to its office, does here for once perform for us some of the work of fiction, reminding us, that is, of the truly mingled tissue of man's nature, and how huge faults and shining virtues cohabit and persevere in the same character. Also a poet and prolific writer, contributing to the field of the sciences, and born with the sun in Virgo and moon in Pisces, the German-born Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, author of renowned works such as The Sorrows of Young Werther, Faust, and The Metamorphosis of Plants. Also an influence of Percy Shelley and Mary Wollstonecraft, all three of them writing Prometheus-themed poetry. Goethe's work in the sciences, however, also reflects the subsequent zeitgeist or spirit of the times. Although he partook in the spirit of quantification of the Enlightenment, the following era of Romanticism equally influenced him. Goethe's Faust spurns knowledge extorted with levers and screws, longing instead for a grasp of nature's secret elements, her hidden active forces, the harmony of the whole of her parts. Instead of the geometrical spirit which strove to dissect, systematize, and find the mechanisms of nature, the guiding spirit of the Romantic era became known in the German-speaking world as natural philosophy. The Romantic scientists revolted against the analytical methods of their predecessors and sought to apply more synthetic methods. Instead of looking for fine differences, Romantic scientists looked for similarities. The German biologist Gottfried Treviranus wrote that in the new science of life, the observations of the vital phenomena of animals and plants receive their proper place and unite themselves into a whole. The most basic tenet of Goethe's scientific method is that we enter into the experience of the phenomenon itself, remaining with it throughout our research, rather than speculating beyond it or replacing the phenomenon with an abstract concept or mathematical model. By dwelling in the phenomenon itself, Goethe maintained that one could come to see the unity and lawfulness of the natural world. In his scientific studies, he was seeking to explain nature by laws of development lying within nature itself, not external forces located outside nature. In this sense, Goethe's approach was truly phenomenological. A phenomenological science draws theoretical concepts from the structure of phenomena themselves rather than an imperceptible reality assumed to be behind them. This approach places emphasis on the scientist's perceptual capacities and underlines the primacy and immediacy of sensory phenomena as reliable sources of true information. Insofar as he makes use of his healthy senses, man himself is the best and most exact scientific instrument possible. We do not need to exclude ourselves or our senses, only our judgment from the scientific process in order to practice good science. The inner lawfulness in nature that Goethe sought to experience was what he called an archetypal phenomenon. The archetypal phenomenon is the ideal unity of a phenomenon from which the diversity of experience or forms arise. Goethe wanted to seek out the idea of nature where it revealed itself most dearly, and then to descend from the perfect to the imperfect in order to understand the latter by the former. Goethe sees in each individual form only one particular development out of one ideal archetypal being which lives in all forms. It is the idea that we can come to know phenomena in their most complex and perfect forms, and from these ideals, we can understand the more simple and imperfect forms as they are expressed through the diversity of what we observe in the natural world. Diversity arises through the fact that something which is the same in idea can exist in different forms in the perceptual world. With this approach, we do not eliminate or reduce the complexity of nature. Thinking moves in the opposite direction from reductionism. Thou art confused, my beloved, at seeing the thousandfold union, shown in this flowery troop, over the garden dispersed. Any a name dost thou hear assigned, one after another, falls on thy listening ear with a barbarian sound. None resembleth another, yet all their forms have a likeness. Therefore, a mystical law is by the chorus proclaimed. Yes, a sacred enigma. O dearest friend, could I only happily teach thee the word, which may the mystery solve. Every plant unto thee proclaimeth the laws everlasting. Every flower speaks louder and louder to thee. But if thou here canst decipher the mystic words of the goddess, everywhere will they be seen, e'en though the features are changed. Soon, how friendship with might unveiled itself in our bosoms, and how amour at length brought forth blossom and fruit. Think of the manifold ways wherein nature hath lent to our feelings, silently giving them birth, either the first or the last. Yes, and rejoice in the present day, for love that is holy seeketh the noblest of fruits, that where the thoughts are the same, where the opinions agree, that the pair may in rapt contemplation lovingly blend into one, find the more excellent world. Born in French Algeria to a Jewish family in 1930, postmodern philosopher Jacques Derrida is another Pisces moon, opposite Venus, conjunct Neptune in Virgo. Surrounded by genius and controversy, he developed major contributions to a semiotic form of analysis known as deconstructionism, taking things a step beyond Heidegger in that blank space of the sentence, being is, and that it can't ever be filled in. Deconstruction was and is not a single technique or even a special set of technique. It's like the everyday chores of housework. There's always work to be done, and it's never finished. Derrida wanted to examine philosophy in a way that reminds us that it stems from a lineage of a long-standing cultural institution going back to ancient Greece, interpreted within the framework of Indo-European language to the extent that we can understand what that phrase means, and is a byproduct of Western civilization. Philosophy is not an eternal project in the mind of God, but one of a particular type of materiality and history, and that the most interesting things we can find out about through the study of philosophy will not be from reading it poorly or the assumption that reading any book by one philosopher is better than another, but by paying close attention to the very things one tries to repress or marginalize in a text. During his career, Derrida published more than 40 books, together with hundreds of essays and public presentations. He sparked much controversy among American academics and is still greatly misunderstood to this day, perhaps some of that stemming from his mischievous sense of humor. How can another see into me, into my most secret self, without my being able to see in there myself, and without my being able to see him in me? And if my secret self, that which can be revealed only to the other, to the holy other, to God, if you wish, is a secret that I will never reflect on, that I will never know or experience or possess as my own, then what sense is there in saying that it is my secret, or in saying more generally that a secret belongs, that it is proper to or belongs to someone, or to some other who remains someone? It's perhaps there that we find the secret of secrecy, namely that it is not a matter of knowing and that it is there for no one. A secret doesn't belong. It can never be said to be at home or in its place. The question of the self, who am I, not in the sense of who am I, but rather who is this I that can say who? What is the I, and what becomes of responsibility once the identity of the I trembles in secret? Born and raised in Cincinnati, Ohio, on July 29, 1885, Theda Bara attended the University of Cincinnati for 2 years and then worked in local theater productions. After moving to New York City in 1908, she made her Broadway debut the same year in The Devil. Bara often is cited as the first sex symbol of the film era. It was popular at the time to promote an actress as mysterious and with an exotic background. The film studios promoted her with a massive publicity campaign, billing her as the Egyptian-born daughter of a French actress and Italian sculptor, and claimed she spent her early years in the Sahara Desert under the shadow of the Sphinx, then moved to France to become a stage actress. He called her the Serpent of the Nile and encouraged her to discuss mysticism and the occult in interviews. Some film historians point to this as the birth of two Hollywood phenomena, the studio publicity department and the press agent. Between 1915 and 1918, she appeared in 33 films: The Galley Slave, Sin, Destruction, The Serpent, The Tiger Woman, The Rose of Blood, The Forbidden Path, When a Woman Sins. The fan magazines called her the arch torpedo of domesticity, the queen of vampires, the wickedest woman in the world, purgatory's ivory angel, the devil's handmaiden, the priestess of sin, and the Ishmaeline of domesticity. We can see that the Pisces moon is like a fog machine of magic and enchantment, that it can grant outstanding clarity accompanied by wonder, as much as it can cover the truth. How through fiction and fantasy there can still be a path to that truth. A fascination with the inner workings of a thing without sacrificing the miracle of existence. Sometimes a carnival house of mirrors, full of ghosts and reflections around every turn, seemingly incoherent and barely making sense, yet a magnificently orchestrated show is going on, where you might as well let yourself be swept up and carried away for a while by the multitudinous parade of characters wanting to share the glorious and unique experience of being.
Of ghosts, and that without reflectors, and creepy things with wings, and gaunt and grisly spectres. He can fill you crowds of shrouds, and horrify you vastly. He can rack your brains with chains, and gibberings grim and ghastly. And if your planet he changes organically with an urbanity full of satanity, vexes humanity with an inanity, faithful to vanity, driving your host to the verge of insanity. Barring tautology, in demonology, electrobiology, mystic nosology, spirit philology, high-class astrology, such is his knowledge, he isn't the man to require an apology. Oh! My name is John Wellington Wells. I'm a dealer in magic and spells, in blessings and curses, and never fail verses in prophecies, witches and elves. And if anyone anything lacks, he'll find it already in stacks, if he'll only look in on the resident inn of a 70 simile acts.